We try really wild things, like the whole corn ice thing. We came up with it in a meeting and we had a board artist execute it. And just right off the bat was like, this is crazy and it actually works.
This is true of all things in animation. It's not a photocopy of reality. It's not a recreation, it's a distillation. You're distilling a movement or a shape or a silhouette.
That sequence took a long time to make because we will do these blocky dance moves that is roughly representing something.
Hi, I'm Maggie Kang.
Hi, I'm Kang and Appelhans.
Hi, my name is Gary Lee, and we're going behind the scenes on Collider.
I always knew I wanted to do something set in Korean culture, and for some reason, demonology, and specifically the black cat, like demons that are the Grim Reapers of Korea, was the most iconic thing that I wanted to see in the movie, and knew that I wanted to lean into those guys as the villains when it became this K-pop project.
It's interesting because I'm a very visual person, so usually every movie I develop, it starts with images. Ami Thompson and Helen Chen were our first two artists doing paintings, and they did some incredible paintings of our interpretation of the OG hunters, the women in Korean history who did this stuff. But I think actually the moment we were often pitching the movie around this idea of the power of music and that kind of feeling, the butterflies you get in a concert. And so when we enlisted EJ, who wrote a lot of the songs and is the voice of Rumi, she had demos very early stages. And when the first time she played us her demo, I was like, oh my God, I got the butterfly theme. We could do this. This could work. We could recreate that inside of a movie.
Just like that idea of music and the feeling you get, we really wanted to lean into that as a superpower and a magical force in our movie. And that's the force that powers the Honmun, which is the barrier. And with the K-popness of it, I think what's so unique and special about K-pop is how much the fans are engaged with the idols. And there's kind of this very special relationship between idol and fan where there's so much give and take and this kind of love and friendship almost that is created. And so we really wanted the fans to be part of fueling this power that the hunters hold. And at the very end, in the climax, when the entire stadium start to sing and gives Rumi that boost of power, is us pay tribute to that special connection that the fans play in these idols' lives.
Mayday, mayday! There's 10,000 fans at the door screaming. It's sounding really scary.
The dance sequences, I have to give a lot of credit to the animation director, Josh Beveridge's team as well. When doing a sequence like that is so much of a chicken or the egg thing between camera and animation. You need someone to dance for you to photograph, but you need a camera to be there for the animators to be able to place character in there to start dancing. The Saja Boy debut at Myeongdong was the very first dance sequence that we tackled that. And that sequence took a long time to make because we will do these blocky dance moves that is roughly representing something, and then we'll start shooting it. But then once the animation goes in there, they do something quite different where they come up with different ideas. And then we have to go back to kind of refine that camera. K-pop is such a modern film. It's such a modern fable that we want to lean into even the TikTok or the social media. When they do dances, they have their heads locked to the camera, all those tricks we want to kind of honor and also be mindful of K-pop music video sensibility, something that's really dynamic. The whole performance, K-pop, you have the moments where you feel like a music video, the dance and the camera is so choreographed. And that moment you feel like you're watching a concert like Taylor Swift or Lady Gaga, and how you move that camera is very differently. And it's so nuanced. And whether the camera is going to be off stage shooting them with super long lens, or the camera is on stage with them, Takedown is a good example of being on stage with them. And dividing that up for the emotional impact is essentially the North Star, again, to how we kind of think about this.
Our first thing with performance was, this is true of all things in animation. It's not a photocopy of reality. It's not a recreation, it's a distillation. You're distilling a movement or a shape or a silhouette. And in doing so, the artist has control of that. And you could just do motion capture, something that has its own pros and cons, but Sony ImageWorks has an incredible team of animators. And so we talked a lot about, let's look at the choreography and the performance, and let's not just copy it, let's distill it so that they perform in a way that's unique to animation. Josh Beveridge is our head of animation, and we had 70, 80, at times 100 incredible incredible animators that were all bringing their lifetime of skill to every shot. So what's so cool about animation?
Create the entire movie in drawings first, and our editor, Nathan Schaff, takes all these images and it gets edited and timed, and we put temp voices, existing music before we actually create original score and song. We use this program called Miro, which is like a digital bulletin board, and we had these huge Miro boards full of GIFs and still images from music videos or magazines that we just piled on there for inspiration for all the artists, and it just became this huge library of information that we had been working on and collected for like, I don't know, 3-4 years.
And it's like a 3-minute sequence in animatic. I could have anywhere from 150 to 500 storyboards. So you take that times 90 minutes and you're looking at 10,000 drawings. And then I think it's one of the least understood parts of animation is how important the story artists are and how essential they are to the writing and creating of these films.
We went with a Alexa, that large format camera, and for the reason that it provides like a really big, like straight out of the box bokeh effects that gives you this really romantic look, which I feel like a lot of K-drama sensibility kind of leans into. Some of those like Asian TV shows, they don't have a lot of money to do crazy setups. So they'll have like a very small crew. So they will use the bokeh to kind of like soften everything out. So to have a camera that's able to both be very dynamic, be able to capture wide scope, but also to be able to have that really shallow type of feel seem ideal for the film, given the palette on the film. So traditionally in what we do, coming from animation or live action, Previs, layout world, Autodesk Maya has been the dominant software for decades. And Unreal Engine is really started as a game engine. And what it excels is the fact that you can kind of load insanely big open world that people can run in. And just indirectly, you created this package that visually allow for massive density of either environment, and also the camera that is in Unreal Engine is accurately kind of replicating a real world camera in the way the physics is calculated. The downside of Unreal Engine is the fact that it just doesn't have a lot of robust animation tools because it's really made for video games. It's for real-time interactive choices with the player. Both Sony ImageWorks and Sony Picture Animation had made a choice to, hey, we're gonna try to do things in Unreal Engine now, and we need like a guinea pig to test it out. And we're now shooting images in very, very rough form, very, very early stages that really kind of represented what the real photography looked like. So if I'm photographing you in animation, sometimes like the very first image when I capture you, like everything's sharp, you'll see all the junks in the background, and then people start having discussions on like, hey, can we move that trash can all the way in the background? But later on, after lighting, like that trash can is going to be out of focus. So the fact that we can do that very early on, then the conversation becomes more meaningful in the sense of looking at that shot for what it is.
In animation, we have the freedom to recut everything and play around with scenes and rearrange moments and beats. And we try really wild things, like the whole corn eyes thing. We came up with it in a meeting and we had a board artist execute it, and just right off the bat was like, this is crazy, and it actually works. And then there's certain things like some of the date sequences, took a lot of rewriting because the shots kind of remained the same, but what the characters needed to say changed quite a bit depending on like how we were creating the moments around that scene.
We're in this pretty neat era now where international filmmakers are so well known and respected that like probably the third time Maggie and I were sitting talking about the movie as collaborators, we started talking about the host and Bongino and like his tonal ability to like put things that I'm like, you can't do that. You can't do horror and comedy right there, right next to each other. And he does it, and it opens your mind to like a tone. And we talk about him as fans, and all of a sudden, without having to like talk more than 5 minutes, Maggie and I kind of know where the other one's head is at with like how we think the movie could work tonally. And it's so nice that we're in this era where those kind of influences can make their way to us, and then as such into the animation genre that people think has a pretty limited scope.
K-pop is already a global phenomenon as it is, even before K-pop Demon Hunters. So the idea that there is a global appetite for this, I think is there. When I first saw about this story, because I knew Maggie for almost 20 years, I remember seeing her at Sony's cafeteria, and I was like, hey, Maggie, what are you doing here? Because I was helping out on this film Vivo at the time. And Maggie was like, I have a project here called K-pop Demon Hunters. And at the time, I just go, Okay, that's interesting, and she very roughly described this. And I think we all thought is super fresh. And after you see the whole thing put up as a story, I'm like, oh my God, this is a gem. But the idea that it would just explode, I think that the world is just ready for it. I think she tapped into something that is very special. I applaud her for that instinct.
The music is resonating with so many people because it's really good music, but the lyrics are really good as well. So whether you tie them in with the movie and remembering the characters, or like they also just live on their own, as like Takedown, for example, we always talked about that as like a song that you would sing to your ex that you're bad at. And it's a perfect song for that, but it's also for the Demon Boys. So always thinking about the kind of dual facets of these songs.
When we're setting out to make a movie that tried to honor that power of it, and Maggie and I joked about this, we'd meet with all these incredible musicians, Teddy Park, and then Ian, and then different songwriters like EJ and Lindgren. And there's so many. And we'd pitch them the movie and we'd be all nervous about like, I don't know if they're going to like this. And then they'd be like, do you want to make a movie about like music as like a literal soul touching superpower? We're like, yeah. And they're like, well, of course we want to do that. What are you talking about? That's our life. We're like, oh, really?